Well, I'm deep into it, Glenn. In fact, I finished writing a column a little while ago, be out in Russia tonight, talking about the dead cat MOU. You know that cat that was it dead? Was it alive? Was in coma? Apparently, it's another resuscitation in progress. And against all odds, in fact, I try to have a little bit of poetic license with it. And in full Odyssey mode, I compared the almost dead MOU cat as a voyager in a raft in the middle of an ocean in revolt under the wrath of Poseidon, but he was still resisting. So this is what it is at the moment, and based on facts. Well, the most important fact is that the diplomatic channel is being revived actively, and it involves a lot of players. As our audience knows, Pakistan is the key mediator between Iran and US. But of course, there's also help and confabulations, let's put it this way, with Oman, with Qatar, with Saudi Arabia, the Turks dropping on and off. And of course, behind all of them is China. China wants a peaceful resolution of this war. And this, in fact, what we have now is a no war, no peace situation, which is the last thing that the Chinese want. The Chinese are absolutely sticklers for stability, continuity, predictability. And this involves one of their key strategic allies across Eurasia. So this diplomatic channel, which we can describe as Beijing, Islamabad, Tehran, is very, very active. Very important because both are New Silk Road's Belt and Road Initiative partners. In the case of Pakistan, of course, the most important BRI project is the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. And with Iran, China has on top of it a strategic partnership, a 25-year deal signed, sealed, delivered, ongoing, $400 billion, energy, and infrastructure. And of course, they are the two key partners linking South Asia to West Asia for China. So how is this manifesting itself in practice? And that's when the complication of the whole thing becomes visible. Do you know who's arriving in Islamabad tomorrow, Glenn? Arakshi, on an official visit. He got an open invitation earlier this week from Ishaq Dar, the Pakistani foreign minister. Say, look, you can come anytime you want. So Arakshi arrives tomorrow. And he's not going to talk only to Ishaq Dar. He's going to talk to the top guys, Prime Minister and Chief of the Army, Field Marshal Asim Munir. This trio, Munir, Ishaq Dar, and Shehbaz Sharif, the prime minister, they are coordinating closely with the Iranians. For the moment, let's say 0.1% on a scale from 0 to 100 of reopening the negotiations, of course, the dead cat MOU, resuscitating it once again. But everybody knows the Iranian conditions because they have been very explicit. And for over 2 months already. Why do I say over 2 months or 2 months? Because on August 16, which is next week, it's the end of the 60-day clock inbuilt in the MOU. And obviously, as we know, nothing happened because the Americans blew up the MOU. So now, this diplomatic channel is trying to bring the MOU back. For that, they need the Iranians to once again give, to quote John Lennon, give peace a chance. But, this is a little bit too much, isn't it? Because they gave peace a chance over and over again. And every possibility of a diplomatic understanding was destroyed by the Americans. So tomorrow in Islamabad, you're going to have Arashi discussing with the three Pakistanis, okay, what happens next? Inside Iran, Glenn, at the top level, it's very complicated. And this is something that we could confirm with our Iranian friends and sources. There is, how can I put it diplomatically, a divergence of strategic opinions between the diplomatic vector and the more hardline military vector. For instance, Vahidi, the commander-in-chief of the IRGC, in public, he said that President Pezeshkian should resign, which is something very, very serious. Why? Because he's completely opposed to any possibility of negotiating with the Americans. So this means essentially Pezeshkian as the president and Arakshi as Minister of Foreign Affairs. And of course, the majority of the RGC generals, they are against any negotiations with the Americans because basically they're saying, look, we proved our point. They are non-negotiable. Sergei Lavrov once again, the United States is non-agreement capable and non-negotiation capable, as we have seen, all of us have seen it. But then there's the element of Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei. Because his position is, he's the invisible leader, as everybody knows. But of course, all these major decisions, they go to the top, and he is the ultimate decider. So the fact that he gave, let's say, a chance to the diplomatic channel to go on and to have discussions about the MOU, even though he was opposed to the MOU from the start. So the whole situation proved his point. He was correct from the start. He knew that this thing would never work with the Americans. But the thing is, at the same time, the Iranians cannot say no to diplomacy. And that's where Arakshi comes in. And Arakshi is the global face of Iranian diplomacy. He is now respected all over the world, not only in West Asia, across Eurasia, but all over the global south. So they will keep giving peace a chance. But the mood among the IRGC generals, including the commander-in-chief of the IRGC, Vahidi, the mood in the streets, as we saw during the funeral ceremonies related to the burial of Ayatollah Khamenei, all across Iran, from Tehran and Qom all the way to Mashhad and all the provinces, it's impossible to have an understanding with the Americans. So the leadership, they have to pay attention to the streets, but they have to pay attention to this divergence of opinions between the political vector and the military vector. So it's a very, very complicated position. But they're not closing down the door to diplomacy. On the contrary, this trip by Arakshi tomorrow is basic to, once again, coordinate with the Pakistanis, who are talking not only to the Americans, because Asim Munir has a direct connection with the White House, one of the very few. How can we describe him? He's not a political leader. He is the most important military authority in Pakistan. He is the top man in charge. There's no other way to put it, right? And he has Trump on speed dial. Very few people have that. So, and they also talking to Saudi Arabia, which you know, and all of us, and a great deal of our audience knows, they made the supreme stupidity of picking a fight at the same time with Yemen and with the Popular Mobilization units in Iraq. And now they have to backtrack. And according to what our Pakistani mediator sources, they told Larry Johnson and myself, and we asked over and over again, so what is your position vis-a-vis Saudi Arabia? They said, look, our political leadership basically told them, stand down. This means Islamabad told Riyadh, we are not going to pick your fights, and we're not going to be involved if you pick a big fight again with Yemen and now with Iraq as well. So for the moment, Saudi Arabia appears to have listened to it. But of course, once again, to make the whole thing even more complicated, is Saudi Arabia supporting this diplomatic channel trying to resuscitate the MOU? Nobody knows for sure. The Pakistanis, they tell us, look, our impression is that they understand the stakes, and the fact that MBS called Trump this past weekend personally and said, don't go on with your gates of hell adventure, because all of us in the GCC would. So this would imply that they know the stakes. But with Saudi Arabia, as you know very well, Glenn, because it's such an opaque regime, we never know what really goes on. There's no access for anybody to know how MBS makes his decisions. So this is a huge interrogation point in this already extremely complex situation. But the main takeaway, to answer your question directly, okay, the headline to answer your question directly, the MOU dead cat is not dead yet. They're trying a resuscitation program. We don't know if it's going to work or not.
Well,
it's tough. It's very tough, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I've always been quite pessimistic about the MOU, but at the heart of the conflict now, though, is what makes it impossible for Trump to declare victory and go home, essentially, is the Strait of Hormuz. This is a massive problem. And I've seen now two pieces of news which are somewhat in conflict. At least it appears so. The first one is that the Iranians and Oman are close to a deal. They're still disagreeing on the amount of fees which they would collectively charge from the transiting ships. And of course, the United States demands no fees at all. But again, it doesn't get a veto power in this, it appears. So this is the one news. The other one is that the Iranian state media apparently reports that the Iranian parliament is pushing a bill in which they would then just formalize control over the Strait of Hormuz. And this would prohibit passage of vessels belonging to Israel, the United States, and the countries who have caused damage to Iran. They must pay compensation before they can use the strait again. So again, this will be, I guess, a hardline bill in the Iranian parliament, I think. So this seems not to harmonize completely with what the Iranians and Oman are negotiating. So how do you see the Strait of Hormuz on the diplomatic front?
Of course, this is the absolute key issue even before February 28th, because no one should ever forget that this war has nothing to do with the Iranian nuclear dossier. This is an oil war. This is an oil choke point and choke point war. This is a war that was to make sure that the Strait of Hormuz and beyond, and every form of energy exported by Iran, which should have gone through regime change in the first 48 hours of the war, will be based in petrodollars and not in petro-yuan or other currencies. So all that went downhill in the course of the war. So now we are in a completely different situation where Iran is affirming its control of this absolutely key energy choke point. Like forever, the whole thing has changed. And it's absolutely impossible, not only for Trump is a messenger, for American elites to actually admit the extent of this strategic defeat. And that's the point that is being discussed by the Iranian parliament right now. We're going to solidify our control of the Strait of Hormuz in detail, which is something that they have been talking about from the beginning. after the first days of the war started on February 28th. What we have at the moment on the table, on the negotiating table, and that's the only thing being negotiated at the moment. Everything that we see being spun by American mainstream media essentially is nonsense. There is only one negotiation going on at the moment, and it's a technical channel. And we managed to confirm that with our Iranian friends. Iranian technicians and Omani technicians are sitting on the same table and discussing a temporary, and it's not even long term. The long-term deal will be the one that is being discussed at the Majlis, at the parliament. For the moment, the Omanis and the Iranians are discussing a temporary arrangement, which is quite simple. Everything sailing into the Strait of Hormuz is subjected to IRGC Navy, their procedures, the Persian Gulf Authority, the new body, PGSA, payment of fees, administrative fees, whatever that, humanitarian fees, maintenance, security, whatever. And everybody sailing out of the Persian Gulf, there will be two stages. First, they will be cleared by the Omani authorities, but everything will be supervised by the Iranian authorities. So what we have essentially being discussed and practically approved between, once again, strictly Tehran and Muscat. Nobody else is part of this negotiation. Nobody. Nobody in the Persian Gulf, outside, whatever. 100% Iranian control coming in, and let's say 50% Iranian control going out. This is what's being discussed. And it could be announced in the next, let's say, next few days. Quite possible. So there are two parallel tracks. One is the technical track, Iran-Oman, temporary. And the other one, this is the big deal. What the Majlis, the Iranian parliament, will institutionalize as the new deal, the new groove, whatever you want to discuss in terms of who navigates inside and outside of the Strait of Hormuz. So this is when this is approved by the parliament, the Trump administration is going to be beyond freaking out with unexpected consequences, as we all know. But very important for the moment, we have two parallel tracks, and they are not intersecting.
Well, the overarching objective for Iran, though, for long-term peace is to, essentially get the United States out of the region. And I was wondering how could this be done? Does it entail? Can it be done through controlling the Strait of Hormuz, or does it entail destroying, like physically, all the bases in the region? Is it pressuring the Gulf states? Because something appears to be shifting a bit. That is, the Iranians going on the offensive, that is attacking Jordan in this way. This was kind of interesting, and you can interpret it in many ways. One, the Iranians are going after American bases, but at the same time, you see all these officials and experts in Jordan signing this letter that it's time to get the U.S. bases out of Jordan. So is this what is the pathway essentially for there's different pathways for Iran to expel the United States from the Middle East?
Well, Glenn, the way the chessboard is being changed by Iran reflects their self-confidence. And this is something that we saw during the week of the ceremonial week of the burial of Ali Khamenei, part of his family, etc., the processions, the people in the streets, how this was viewed in Iraq, in the both sacred cities of Najaf and Karbala. And of course, how the leadership, starting with leader Mojtaba Khamenei, and of course, the Supreme National Security Council, and then both vectors, the diplomatic vector which is the one that everybody follows because Arakshi is on the headlines literally every hour, and the more complicated military IRGC vector. They feel confident that they have already inflicted a strategic defeat on the Americas. The extent of this strategic defeat is what they are trying to negotiate among themselves now. Like, how far should we push that? How far we are going to humiliate the Trump administration on a daily basis? And this has several vectors once again. The most obvious for everyone following it is the progressive destruction of the US bases all across the Persian Gulf and beyond. Beyond means essentially Erbil in Iraqi Kurdistan and in Jordan. That pounding day after day, which is now even Pentagon generals recognize that these bases are practically gone. So we have a concourse of circumstances which is immensely negative to the Trump administration. They are running out of everything. Patriots, THAADs, whatever, everything. They're running out of bases. In fact, they had to transfer most of it to Israel, which is, from a Sun Tzu point of view, is brilliant because the Iranians managed to put the US inside the Israeli box. The repercussions are going to be, wow, mind-boggling. We're not there yet. They know everything about the timelines because they run the clock. So this means that next week, mid-August, like everybody was predicting, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, everybody and his neighbor, it's the red line for the depletion of the American strategic petroleum reserves. So they won't get away with putting loads of oil on the market to lower prices. That's it. And Trump knows that. And Trump knows the date, and Trump knows this is next week. And of course, they know that in terms of the diplomatic channel we were discussing in the beginning of our show, being reopened, it will have to be reopened according to what was signed by both presidents, and it's in the MOU. End of all wars. Start paying, giving Iran's money back, sanctions relief, no more war against Lebanon, you name it. Discussion about the Strait of Hormuz, obviously. And the Iranians are saying, look, it has to follow our order of priorities. And the Americans are saying, no, the first thing to discuss is the nuclear dossier. And the Iranians are saying, no. We explained to you over and over again, and it is in the MOU. The last stage is to discuss the nuclear dossier. To make it even more complicated, the Americans have no clue whatsoever about how much enriched uranium Iran has and where is it. Did they disperse it? They don't know. Where is it? They have no idea. Because, of course, the IAEA has not been inspecting for months. Are they on the verge of building a nuclear weapon? They don't know. Look, if anybody in the Trump administration was listening to Professor Ted Postel said, look, depending on what they have, they could build 10 nuclear bombs in a matter of 2 weeks with the amount of enriched uranium that they had the last time it was certified. So the Americans basically don't know anything about anything. And on top of it, the depletion of everything concerning their strategic hegemony in the Persian Gulf and West Asia is evaporating. So what cards do they have? No cards at all, as many of us have been saying for weeks, if not months, right? Which adds to their strategic despair, in fact. And it was leading towards an absolutely demented decision to provoke the gates of hell by bombing Iran again. And then we needed to have, for instance, people like MBS calling Trump and say, "Don't do this because you're gonna get you're gonna get us all killed, all of us in West Asia." So, this is the short version of the